Time management is pain management. In fact, money management is pain management. Weight management is pain management. It's all pain management because all human behavior is spurred by a desire to escape discomfort. Master these internal triggers or they become our masters. Is it any surprise when you put people in cages that they behave like animals? And that's what's happening with our children. And so the phone isn't the problem. The phone is a symptom of a problem.
I'm a very big fan of your first book, Hooked, and I read it many years ago when I was working in tech company in Silicon Valley, and I just reread it recently. But I believe their audience who are watching our video, maybe they haven't started reading the first book yet. Maybe we can talk a little bit about what's the Hook model about.
Sure.
Could you share a little bit how the Hook model operates? Like what are the elements and how does it work? Just give
Sure. What's your favorite habit-forming product? What's a product you use all the time?
Oh my God. When I was reading the book recently, I keep thinking about an app I've been using is Red Note in China. Red Note. Yeah, you can equivalent to TikTok. Just when I feel bored, I just, okay, there may be something new, and I just open the app and read a few posts.
Perfect. Okay, let's do Red Note / TikTok. Because like I said, I haven't used Red Note, but I think I understand the basic hook. So every hook starts with a trigger, and there are two kinds of triggers. We have what we call external triggers. These are the pings, the dings, the rings, everything in our outside environment that tells us what to do. And then we have what's called internal triggers. We'll get back to those in a minute. So the external trigger might be some kind of notification. The next step of the hook is the action phase. The action phase is defined as the simplest behavior done in anticipation of a reward. So the easiest thing you can do to get psychological relief. Open an app, scroll a feed, push a play button. Very, very simple actions that lead you to the third step, which is a reward. And not just a reward, a variable reward. So variable rewards, this comes from the research of B.F. Skinner, the father of operant conditioning. He took these pigeons back in the 1950s. He put them in a little box. Today we call this a Skinner box. And he allowed the pigeons to peck at the disc whenever they were hungry. So very quickly, he could train the pigeons to peck at the disc and reliably get a little food pellet, a little reward. But then Skinner did something interesting. One day he walked into the laboratory and he checked his pockets and he realized he didn't have enough of these food pellets. So he couldn't afford to give a pigeon a food pellet every time. He could only afford to give it to them once in a while. And what he found was amazing. And it's changed our understanding of psychology forever. What he realized was that when the pigeons sometimes pushed the disc and would receive a reward, but then the next time they pecked the disc, they would not receive the reward. What he found was the rate of response, the number of times the pigeon pecked at the disc increased. So variability, mystery, uncertainty is at the core of what makes things interesting. Whether it's the news, right? Why do we watch the news? The first three letters of news, N-E-W, is new. We don't want to know what's happened yesterday. We want to know what's new, what we don't know. Does the news tell us what's important? No. Does the news tell us what we need to know? No. The news tells us what gets us to watch. Not the most important story that has to do anything with us. It tells us about wars 3,000 miles away that we have nothing to do with. It tells us about murder and chaos and all this danger around us that has very little effect on us actuality, because that's what gets us to watch what's new. Sports. Why do we like to watch sports? Some stupid ball bouncing around. I mean, think about it. It's kind of ridiculous. If an alien came to Earth and watched a football match, they say, what are these people doing? Like, that makes no sense. It's variability. Gambling, right? Why do we like to gamble? Because there's uncertainty, there's variability, there's intermittent rewards. And that's exactly what makes an app like TikTok or Red Note interesting. You don't know what you're going to find. To find out more information, you have to keep scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, just like a slot machine. And then finally, and most importantly, in the age of AI, is the fourth step of the hook model, which is the investment phase. The investment phase is a bit of work that the user does to make the product better with use. And this is really revolutionary. This has never happened before in the history of manufacturing, because it used to be that if you wanted something, you bought whatever the company made, right? Henry Ford was famous for saying, you can have any color of Model T as long as it's black. Why did he say that? Because that's all he could make, right? It was very difficult. Today, you can have a blue car or a red car or a white car. You can have cars in any color you want. But back then, that was very, very difficult. Well, we have moved from what Henry Ford did of any color as long as it's black to today, companies are creating products for a market of one. So your version of Red Note or TikTok or Facebook or WhatsApp or Amazon or Google, all these products are customized just for you based on the investment phase. Every time you use the product, you're making it better with use. This is what I call stored value, because unlike things in the physical world, my clothing, your car, this couch, all this stuff loses value with wear and tear, right? The more you use it, it depreciates. Habit-forming products do the opposite. They appreciate. They get better and better the more you use it. The more you use Red Note, the more it knows what you're interested in, because the algorithm keeps getting smarter based on your data. That's a revolution. And that's only going to become more important with the age of AI, because everything will be customized in the future. And if you don't customize, if you don't personalize, your competition will. So that's where we're going. So what this means is that over time, and this is where the real magic of a habit-forming product begins, begins, you don't need the external triggers. Remember, that's where we started. The pings, the dings, the rings. A habit-forming product doesn't need annoying messages, doesn't need emails, doesn't need advertising. How many ads have you seen for Facebook or Instagram or WhatsApp or Slack or RedNote? Not many. I mean, compared to the market cap of these companies, they spend almost nothing on advertising to remind you, because you're using it out of habit. You're using it not because of an external trigger, but because of an internal trigger. That's when a habit is formed. When you're using your phone on your own without any kind of prompting, that's when the habit is formed. And through successive cycles, through these 4 steps of the hook model, that's how our behaviors changed and our habits are formed.
An internal trigger is our boredom, our negative emotions that cause us want to escape pain. And then we take action to open the app, get reward for something new, and then keep opening the app because the recommendations just get more and more accurate.
It's important to also know how to make sure that you're not taken advantage of, that you control the products as opposed to the products controlling you.
Since you were talking about a few of the discomfort, maybe let's switch gear a little bit. Like in your book, Indistractable, you mentioned that many distractions originate from the need to escape a psychological discomfort. And how should we understand and deal with the psychological discomfort? Maybe we can elaborate a little bit over it.
I think it's important, before we understand distraction, we need to understand motivation. Why do we do anything and everything? And typically we think of motivation as carrots and sticks, that if you do a good thing, you get a reward. If you do a bad thing, you get punishment. It's a nice metaphor, but it's not exactly right. That in the brain, neurologically, everything we do for only one reason, and that is the desire to escape discomfort. That all human behavior is spurred by a desire to escape discomfort. So that must therefore mean time management is pain management. In fact, money management is pain management. Weight management is pain management. It's all pain management, because all human desire, or all human behavior, is spurred by a desire to escape discomfort. So that's a very, very important point to realize, that everything we do, we're looking to escape discomfort, even wanting to feel good, wanting, hunger, lusting. The desire to feel good is itself psychologically destabilizing. So once you understand that, you realize that distraction is just an impulse control issue. There's nothing wrong with you. You don't have a broken brain. I think we way overdiagnose ADHD, and I've been diagnosed with ADHD. We way overdiagnose, way over-medicate it. But what we don't do is teach people the skills. Remember, pills don't teach skills. We don't teach people the skills to deal with discomfort in a healthy way that leads them towards traction, so they try and escape it with distraction. That's the problem. We just have to learn how to control our impulses in a healthier way. But of course, the more you use things to take your mind off of your trouble, the more your brain habituates to those things. And so when it comes to distraction, we have to realize that 90% of our distractions aren't from outside. Only 10% of our distractions are outside of us. And this has been scientifically validated. 90% of our distractions begin from within. Boredom, loneliness, fatigue, uncertainty, anxiety. So that has to be the first step, is to master these internal triggers, or they become our masters.
Master the internal triggers, or they become our master. Wow, in your answer just now, there are so many illuminating points. One of them is time management is pain management. Money management is pain management as well, and a few others.
That's right.
Can you elaborate a little bit, like how to interpret, for example, time management is pain management for the audience?
Sure.
It's a shocking point.
Yeah. So, name common distraction. Let's use you as the test case, Kelly. What do you get distracted by?
I distracted by red notes.
The way we decide how we fix this, the first thing we do is we understand what is the difference between traction and distraction. They're opposites. And you notice that both words, traction and distraction, end in the same word, action, which reminds us that distraction is not something that happens to us. It is an action that we take. So traction is any action that pulls you towards your values, pulls you towards the things you said you want to do. Distraction is anything else. So one of the best things you can do is to make time for the thing you want to do. If you like going on RedNote, do it. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not bad for you. It's only harmful when it's pulling you away from something you said you were going to do.
Yeah.
So if you said, I'm going to work on a project, but now you're checking RedNote, or I'm going to be with my kids, but I'm checking RedNote, or I'm going to go exercise, but I'm checking RedNote, now it's a problem. But if you said you were going to check RedNote, there's nothing wrong with that. So step number 1 is master internal triggers. Have those tools ready to go when you feel that discomfort. Step number 2 is make time for traction, you said you want to do, on your calendar. Step 3 is hacking back the external triggers. So making sure that when you plan that time, you don't have the app open there next to you, even though those notifications only are about 10% of the reason you get distracted, making sure that you've taken the 5 minutes to turn off those notifications, enter do not disturb for that time. There's other tools and tricks you can do as well. And then finally, prevent distraction with a pact, which is where we decide in advance what we will do when we're tempted towards distraction. So if you use those 4 steps in concert, master internal triggers, make time for traction, hack back external triggers, prevent distraction with packs, anyone can become indistractable and you can get over this distraction of Red Note. I promise.
So it sounds like the last one was prevent with packs. How to interpret that one?
I'll give you a good example. So there's several kinds of packs. There's an effort pack, a price pack, an identity pack, all kinds of packs. And I talk about this in the book. But one that's very, very effective is a price pact. Many times, I ask people who tell me, how distracted they are. They say, oh, I have ADHD and I can't concentrate and crazy the world is today. Everybody has mental illness. Everybody's struggling and it's impossible to concentrate. I can't focus. My kids, my boss, blah, 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 blah. And I say, okay, let's make a little bet here. What's the thing you get distracted from? Do you have something you get distracted from a lot, Kelly?
For example, writing a book. It's a huge project. And that's where I get stuck.
Awesome. And you find yourself distracted?
Yeah.
That's when you check Red Note?
Yes.
You say, okay, on your to-do list, it says I'm gonna write my book, and yet you end up checking Red Note instead.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Now, Kelly, if I said, how much time this week do you want to spend writing your book? What would be a good number of hours this week?
Every day, at least 1 hour. So 7 hours.
Okay, wonderful. 1 hour every day, only working on your book. No Red Note, no distraction, just working on your book for 1 hour a day. That'd be awesome, right? Now, let's make a little bet. What are the chances that you would do that if we made a bet that if you don't do it, you have to pay me $10,000?
Oh, that's painful.
What would happen?
I would do it.
You would do it. Yeah. So we've already established in 2 seconds that you can. Now we're just negotiating the price. Right?
Yeah.
I will tell you, if you have very extreme ADHD or OCD or other conditions where you can't even function, that's a different story. These are people who need medication. Very extreme example. The vast majority of people, even people with ADHD, and I have an ADHD diagnosis as well. When you make this bet with them and you say, look, here's this thing you don't feel like doing, but if you don't do it, you're going to have to pay me $10,000. All of a sudden they can do it. So we've established you can. We're just negotiating the price. So sometimes it's a good idea to make those artificial pacts, those bargains.
That's a very good suggestion. I'm going to try it today. Speaking of distraction, I think now more and more people are talking about kids getting distracted, like kids get hooked on social media or games. How can we apply the strategies from Indistractable to foster children's ability to maintain focus from a young age?
Sure.
Yeah.
So the first and most important step is to get up, go to a mirror and look at yourself. As a parent,
the parents look at themselves. Okay.
Because you cannot raise indistractable kids unless you are an indistractable parent. And I see it all the time. The parents are checking email and they're telling their kids, oh, you can't, you just get off of TikTok, get off of whatever, app or video game you're playing. Meanwhile, they're checking their phone. It doesn't work that way. You have to set a good example. You have to show your kids how to be indistractable. So that's the very first thing you could do. And then what we need to do is to understand the deeper internal triggers that kids are stuck. It's not just about the phones. It's why kids are escaping into their phones. And it turns out that kids are missing, they are deficient in what I call psychological nutrients. And this comes from very old research around what's called self-determination theory, that if you don't get enough of what you need psychologically offline, you look for it online. So I think the rise in mental health is caused not by the technology, it's a symptom of a deeper problem. The technology uses as a symptom of what's really going on is that kids don't have enough psychological nutrients. That's mastery, autonomy, and relatedness. They don't have enough of those 3 psychological nutrients, mostly because they don't have enough time to play. We so over-regulate children today. This is the most regulated generation in history. There's only 2 places where you can tell people where to go, what to think, what to wear, what to eat, who to be friends with, and that's school and prison. And so is it any surprise when you put people in cages that they behave like animals? And that's what's happening with our children, is that we are so regulating them. They're looking for escape. And where do they find escape? They find escape online. And of course, the tech companies are very happy to give them what they're looking for. And so that's the deeper issue, is that our kids don't have enough time for the most important thing in their life psychologically. If you want to raise psychologically resilient kids, don't schedule time for the swimming lessons. Don't schedule time for the ballet. Don't schedule time for the test prep. Don't schedule time for all the tuition and all that shit. Schedule time for play. Schedule time for kids to play with other kids. Without the coaches and the teachers and the parents, kids need time to play. That's how we develop psychological resilience. And so that's the biggest problem. And when we don't let kids play, guess where they go? They go online, right? That's where they feel connection. That's where they feel mastery. That's where they feel freedom, right? I don't think the average adult, parents, they think, oh my God, my kid's always distracted. Try actually living your kid's life. It sucks. Being told what to do every day in school is awful. The average person couldn't do it. The average adult can't do what a high school student needs to be done, who needs to do this, do that, go here, do this, dress like this, be that. It's awful. And yet we expect our kids to do it. That's the big problem. And we don't like to admit that because we don't have any other choices, right? Our schools are our schools. And we figured, well, if we had to suffer, so do they. The problem is when you combine an outlet that we didn't have, which is new, the technology is definitely new, it provides the psychological relief they need that they're not getting in the real world. What we used to do is we used to go outside. We used to play. But now we're so scared of our kids going outside because a stranger might come and kidnap them, which is bullshit. It's, this is the safest generation in history. But that fear keeps kids indoors. Well, what the heck are kids supposed to do indoors? But they're going to go online. And so the phone isn't the problem. The phone is a symptom of a problem.
So it sounds like parents over control. So the kids feel discomfort. They need to escape discomfort. And before, maybe kids escape discomfort by going out and play. And now the easy solution is to just open the phone and play games or go on social media.
That's right. That's a big part of it.
But parents control manipulating kids has been there all the time, or you think that's getting stricter?
I think it's become much worse. And I'll tell you why. It's very simple. We have less kids. That's what's happening. So more attention, more helicopter parenting. Not only that, so what's happened is that in many countries, it's not that women are having fewer. When you look at actually statistically what's going on is that more women than ever are having 0 children. So what's happened is what I call the cousin collapse. So it's not just that there's fewer children per parent. That's also happening. So parents are more involved in kids' lives than ever before. Kids don't have as many friends as they used to have because it used to be you played with your cousins. You hung out with your parents, sisters, and brothers' kids. There's no more cousins because there are many women out there who have 0 children. And so what's happening is when kids don't have time to play with other kids, they get messed up in the head. It's as simple as that. And when they look for relief from that psychological discomfort, from their parents constantly telling them what to do, they want freedom. And guess who gives them freedom? The technology.
That's a very good point.
But by the way, I just want to be clear. I'm not saying the technology doesn't play a role. The technology definitely plays a role. I think that we should have minimum limits on the ages that children are allowed to use technology. But if you think that just getting kids to stop use their devices is going to solve the problem, you're wrong. It's not going to work, right? So these very strict bans, it hasn't solved the real problem. The real problem is that kids don't have time for free play to just be kids.
It sounds like the solution is to let kids play. And the second one is parents needs to be good example. If your parents always on your phone, then you cannot tell your kids like, don't play with your phone, don't play with games.
Yeah.
Is that
right? So that's not going to work. So let's walk through the 4 steps. Step number 1 is understand the internal triggers, understanding your kid's psychological needs, okay, of why they are overusing technology. Step 2 is making time for traction. So one of the best things you can do to help make sure that your kid isn't overusing technology, because remember, using technology isn't the problem. It's overusing the technology that's the problem. It's too much time on any form of media. If a kid is reading a book for 6 hours a day, that's also a problem. It's not just, it's any media that we are overusing because it's what it comes at the cost of. It comes at the cost of playing with friends or going outside or going to the pool or doing other things. So the best thing you can do is schedule time for it. Your kid likes playing video games? Awesome. Sit down with them, have a conversation like a human being. You're not the police officer. You don't need to tell them what to do all day. They are people who can think, for God's sakes. So if you sit down with a kid even 6 years old and say, how much time do you want to go on and play a game or watch videos, as long as it's age appropriate, right? We as parents need to filter content, of course, for our children. But as long as it's age appropriate, there's nothing wrong with it. And then the third step, hacking back the external triggers. One of the reasons that children's mental health is degrading because of technology eats time for sleep. So anything that has the opportunity to beep, buzz, or boop in a child's bedroom should not be there. No television, no radio, no iPads, no fish tanks, no pets. Nothing should be in the bedroom that can interrupt sleep because sleep is essential for physical and mental health. And then finally, making pacts. So one of the things you can do is called an effort pact. One of the things that my daughter and I do, we have this app called Forest that when she was doing homework, she would use this app. I use it still today. When I need to do focus work, I set a timer on this app and it tells me, hey, if I pick up my phone, then there's this little cute icon on my phone, this little virtual tree dies. It's very simple. It's a very cheap app, but it's enough of a reminder to tell me, nope, that's not what I want to do right now. So that's a pact. That's an effort pact that you're making. So it's the same 4 steps, whether you're an adult or a child, or whether you're a parent, a boss for yourself, same 4 steps.